Remember when Blizzard made decently received cinematic platformers instead of focusing on their critically acclaimed MMO and real-time strategy games? Serivich remembers. It's weird to try and find information on Blackthorne. The game seems to have been lost in time with so few knowing what it is, with those who do know what it is struggling to find anything of significance on it. It's because of this that I sat and played through the entire game 5 times, documenting all the small changes as I went along. It would have been 6, but I don't own a GBA, so all of my information on that version of Blackthorne, all 2 things, was gathered from screenshots and videos I could find online. There are plenty of versions of this game, most with only minor differences here and there, some attributed to technical limitations and others being completely radical departures from previous iterations. Oh, and European players, if you're looking at the screen and thinking,
gameplay looks familiar, but the name is not.
Well, that's because you guys are weird and decided to call this game Black Hawk instead of Blackthorne, which completely throws off the look of the title screen and makes it look like a bootleg, but I digress. Well, that covers the PAL section of today's episode. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Serivich, and I would like to welcome you back to Region Locked. Starting off with the 2 earliest versions of the game, Blackthorne was developed by Blizzard Entertainment and published by Interplay Productions for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System on September 23, 1994, as well as on the MS-DOS in the same year, and I say the same year because finding the exact release date for the MS-DOS version of the game is harder than most of the games that I've played. For all intents and purposes, I'm going to be comparing everything to the North American SNES version of Blackthorne, totally not because I'm biased toward it or anything. And before we go on, if you want to play Blackthorne for yourself, Blizzard has provided a free download of the game on battle.net, which is packaged with DOSBox. You'll find a link for that down in the description. These 2 versions of the game are actually pretty different from one another. The most immediate difference to note is that the HUD for the SNES version is fairly barren aside from the health meter in the top right. Jumping over to the MS-DOS version, firstly the health meter is red instead of yellow. This is going to be a theme of this video. Everyone had trouble agreeing on certain aspects of the game, such as health meter color, enemy placement or lack thereof, and the final boss's health. Anyway, in the MS-DOS version, the item selection menu is set vertically on the right side of the screen, whereas the SNES version has the menu spread horizontally as a menu that can be dropped down with the select button. The MS-DOS version also features a save system rather than the password system that the SNES opted for. The visual differences are the least of our worries, though. I'm not even going to pretend to understand how DOS works since I grew up away from most PC influence, but these sounds. I grew up with the SNES version of the game, so listening to the music and sounds for the MS-DOS version was just plain weird. I wouldn't say they're bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's safe to say that the music and sounds of the SNES version are slightly superior. I mean, come on, the Grogs sound like pigs when you shoot them. There is a part of the sound design that I appreciate though, and that's how you can hear gunfights happening off screen. In general, if something like a gunfight is going to be happening on the next screen, it'll go ahead and start happening, which does wonders for immersion. Speaking of immersive gameplay, the load times. My goodness, the load times. I'm just going to play a short clip of the SNES and MS-DOS versions of the game and let you see how much faster the game loads for the MS-DOS. Lastly, the MS-DOS version is just straight up missing a couple of friendly NPCs and enemies. At first I thought this was for technical reasons, but as I played on I wasn't quite sure. But don't worry, because everything bleeds. And oh my god, I'm so sorry. Moving on to the regional differences of the SNES version of Blackthorne, there isn't a whole lot to say. As I mentioned before, the game is called Black Hawk in Europe, and that's about it. The game looks the same, sounds the same, and plays the same, with the caveat that, being a PAL game, it runs at 50 frames per second, which actually makes the game's timing for shooting and platforming a lot easier. Moving on to the Japanese version of Blackthorne, which is now titled that, it also doesn't have very many differences of note. There is one thing, and it's simultaneously good and infuriating. Normally in Blackthorne you can kill anyone you want with no consequences. Tired of people complaining about being prisoners? Shoot him! Guy saying he wished he was free? Shoot him! Don't want that cool new gun? Bomb him! For whatever reason, in the Japanese version of Blackthorne you can't kill any of the friendly NPCs. On the bright side, this means you can shoot past them at an enemy, but that also means that if they get in the way of a ledge you need to jump up to, you can't do anything about it. On September 16, 2003, another version of Blackthorne would be released for the Game Boy Advance by Mass Media Incorporated, which sounds great until you realize the GBA has a lot fewer buttons than the SNES or MS-DOS, so many of the game's basic actions had to be mapped to button combinations. The GBA version also features a save system like its MS-DOS predecessor. Because of the smaller screen of the GBA, this version of the game doesn't show each screen of the game in its entirety and instead features a scrolling screen that follows the player. This version of the game is also much more brightly colored than its predecessors. Comparing all of the games next to each other, a silly set of differences can be seen. Firstly, in the GBA version of Blackthorne, you start off with 9 HP and end the game with 21, whereas in every other version you start with 6 HP and end with 14. Furthermore, in each version of the game on a Nintendo console, the final boss has 25 HP, except for the Japanese version where he has 21. Couldn't even make it a nice round number, huh? Then, in the MS-DOS version of the game, the final boss has 20 HP. If you have any knowledge of this game, then you're probably wondering why I've pretended like there are only these versions of it. Anecdote time. I take all of my notes by hand on college ruled paper, and all of what I've told you up to this point is only half of my total notes for this video. The second half is all on one version of the game. On August 3rd, 1995, Paradox Development released Blackthorne for the Sega 32X because why not take a 16-bit game and make it all 32-bit and shit, right? In theory, I'm behind this idea, so let's turn on the game and...
What the shit, Sega?
Where do I even start with this one? Alright, first off, I will say that the faster load times are nice and the game itself is playable. But why? Oh, why do the characters look like this? Why is everyone so buff? Why do all of the characters look like they were made of clay? Why are the Grogs so silly looking? And what on earth did you do to Sarlacc? Don't get me wrong, some of the graphical changes are very nice looking, especially in terms of environments and set pieces. And then you see some of the backgrounds, like a rainforest with some sunlight peeking through during a rainstorm. Or this desert. Those sure are a lot of trees for a desert. Yes, I realize that there are trees in some deserts, but first of all, this is a wasteland level, and I don't think wastelands are known for their abundance of trees. And secondly, you never even see a tree in this level. Also, the health bar's blue. Fuck your blue health bar. And don't even get me started on the sounds. Alright, you got me started on the sounds. Was it absolutely necessary to have footstep sounds for every step you make, except for the steps you make when you have your gun drawn, which is arguably the best time to have footstep sounds? Why do all the guns sound the same in this version when they were pretty varied in the older versions? Why did you opt to have some unique sounds but rip others directly from the SNES version, which creates an awkward mishmash of sounds in places? Did you think I wouldn't notice? Why does it sound like I'm minorly inconveniencing enemies when I shoot them? And for that matter, why do the enemy laughs sound like this when they're supposed to be intimidating? And the item sounds, were you trying to make them as annoying as possible? Then there's the music. My goodness, the music. Were you even trying with it? First of all, you swap two tracks around and now they don't even come close to matching their stages. The track for the Rainforest stage is played in the Wasteland stage and is sloppily edited so the loop ends earlier than intended, and the Wasteland track plays in the Rainforest stage. They both sound extremely out of place. The now Rainforest stage's track is also played throughout the additional level, so instead of hearing that track for 4 levels, we're hearing it for 8. Pay attention because we're not through yet. The boss music, arguably the best music in the game, is just straight up gone now and is replaced with the same music from the stages we just played before reaching them. Because reasons! You added an entirely new area to the game and still somehow managed to come out with the net loss in total music tracks in the game! A selection that was already limited to begin with. At least before, the tracks didn't overstay their welcome and added to the experience of the areas in which they were presented, but here you couldn't even do that right. Let's speak more about that additional area that's always touted when people talk about this version of the game. I tried to like it, I really did. I can applaud the inclusion of a little more content in a game that was pretty short, but it wasn't good. The other levels of the game feel deliberate in their design. You see a portion of a level you can't get to yet and think, alright, I'll need to come back here later when I get another item. Each piece of a level was made with a specific purpose in mind. This additional area feels like a level that was scrapped from the original version of the game. It's largely forgettable, normally special items are just tossed about, friendly NPCs stand around and complain about not being free, enemies that signified special drops in the previous levels are now common, the new enemy is just a ripoff of later enemies, and the levels overall felt like they'd lasted too long. There's one point where I remember coming across an area and thinking, I'll need to come back here once I get a hover bomb. Then the next screen there was an NPC and I distinctly remember thinking, let me guess, you're gonna give me a hover bomb. And he fucking did. That's not good level design when I can predict exactly what you're going to do. You may have noticed in the video by now that the blood's back, so we have that at least. Yay. Then you may have also noticed that the animations are bad. Watch this grog as it dies. See? A lot of the animations look unnatural, whereas in the SNES version, the animations look pretty good despite being a whole 16 bits inferior. I can't take your enemies seriously when many of them look like they're furiously masturbating. Oh, and there are some missing enemies and friendly NPCs in this one too. Now, I've saved the best part of this game for last. Wait for it. It's coming.
What the actual fuck, Sega?
This and the Wasteland are my favorite levels in the game. You destroyed the Wasteland by changing the music, and now I've gone blind because of this level. Sarlacc's boss theme is some of my favorite music in gaming, and you ruined that too! Come to think of it, I'm pretty sure the 32X version of Blackthorne was made specifically to ruin all the things that made me like the original. I'm sorry everyone, my existence made this happen. Going off on another tangent here, is it unfair for me to call a port of a game bad if that port fixes the glitches from previous versions? In all fairness, it probably is, but any version of Blackthorne that makes me play through the entire third level of the Rainforest stage is just an asshole in my book. Can't even do the alternate costume glitch, which the Japanese version of the game just loves, by the way. And you fixed me being stuck in staring contest limbo with NPCs. I made it a point to try to perform all of the glitches I know in each version I played, and I got them all to work except for when I tried them in the 32X version. Although I couldn't do the alternate costume glitch in the MS-DOS version because enemies seem a lot more hesitant to move around. There's one last thing worth mentioning. There's a version of Blackthorne available for Mac, but I can't find anything solid about it. Some screenshots I've found suggest that it looks like the 32X version, while other screenshots suggest that it looks like the MS-DOS version. I don't know which of those are true, or if maybe there are two versions of the game for Mac, but either way, it's worth looking into if you happen to own a Mac. I don't, so there's that problem. Well, that was a mouthful. I said it before, but I'll go ahead and say it again. If you want to play Blackthorne for yourself, you can download it for free and completely legally from battle.net. The download comes packaged with DOSBox, and it's honestly the version I recommend for general gameplay purposes. But I'm personally not biased at all. I believe the SNES version of Blackthorne is superior due to more refined sound effects and a better soundtrack, but I can see why people might prefer the MS-DOS version. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for watching and remind you to check back at various points in the future for more videos on the regional and platform differences of our favorite games. My name's Serivich, and I'll see you eventually.